if you will notice, what we love about this triangle is that all three of these points, relationship, process, and results, we find to be really critical to incorporate for an effective meeting. And one thing that I really love is that relationship and process show up as the base of this triangle, with results being at the top. And so just conceptually thinking, we have found in our experience and really believe that as facilitators, if we pay equal, if not more attention to what are the relationships going to look like in this meeting and what is the process going to be, then we will get to stronger, more lasting results. So it's not just the three pieces, but that process and relationship are really foundational to a great meeting. And so I just want to walk through the 3 points quickly so that we're all a little bit clear about what we mean by that. So relationship, we just mean here that we're acknowledging individuals in the meeting and really engaging with interests and ways of being and learning and leading that are different for all of us. So this is about how people interact, how we relate to one another, how we feel about being involved in our contributions in a meeting or to a group. It's about how much trust people have with one another, and within that, how reciprocal relationships feel. And so a couple of examples about kind of how we do this, and you'll see this in most of our meetings, and you'll see it today. Check-ins are something that we highly value, and this helps us tap into our individuality in our meetings, and also just how we're doing in a moment, which can totally affect what's going on. And then also meeting in small groups, whether it's pairs or small numbers, gives us a better chance to really connect on a relational level. And then there's process. And so the triangle really shares that meetings that build towards effective outcomes are meetings that build trust and accountability, and that's about how they're led. And so there's all kinds of tools for leading meetings, and we're going to share several of them with you today. And so that's what the process piece is. Are there tools that we can use to kind of structure a meeting so that we're getting at relationships and we're getting to results? So it's the how of things, how the work gets done, how it's designed, how we're making sure to try to hear everybody's voice in a meeting, and then also how we're monitoring and evaluating that. So we love to try to plan meetings with more than one person, which helps with that thinking through multiple ways of learning, of knowing, of thinking. And then we have all kinds of tools, and we'll share a few today. And maybe we'll continue to share some if we continue this, these trainings. And then finally, results. So these are the actions, the next steps, the achievements. And one thing I want to pull out here is that in addition to completing tasks and achieving bigger goals, we list here explicitly celebrating those achievements. So taking the time to really name as a team that you've gotten something done. Pretty straightforward, but really critical to how we go about planning meetings. So we wanted to share that with you all. And then one other piece that we wanted to name and share is this tool, Taking Action for Racial Equity Principles. This comes from Dismantling Racism Works, and the link for that website is here on the slide, and we can also drop that in the chat box. There's tons of great tools on this website. This tool is one that our team uses for accountability. And when we think about decision-making, taking action steps, we really try to remember that any kind of decision-making is a version of power. And so before we make decisions about process or action, we think it can be really helpful to review these principles and just check ourselves about, are we ready to make a decision? Does this process really hold us accountable to these principles? And if we're not ready to make a decision, one thing that I love about these is that also embedded in these principles are, well, if we're not really ready to make a decision, if this isn't quite a right group or time, There are things within these principles that help us think about what we might do next if it's not decision making and if we're kind of taking a step in a different direction. So those are some conceptual tools that we lean on heavily in our facilitation. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jenny.
Thank you, Abby. Thanks, Megan. Hey, everybody. I'm going to start getting into more specifics now. And if you have any questions or thoughts so far from what you've heard, feel free to go ahead and use the chat. The chat's your friend. People will respond to you privately, or we'll all respond as a team. So feel free to have any questions or comments about what we share in the chat. And I just have to say, all of you that are not on video, given that little dog meme, I know what you look like. It's cool. I get it, and it's great. So here we are with this graphic and this little comic that says, I fear we have strayed from the agenda somewhat. And you guys may have seen this before, but how many of you have experienced a meeting that is similar to the one shown here? We've heard that a lot of these things may be true, particularly in times of stress and when people aren't necessarily engaged. People have said that some folks aren't interacting, they're not answering the questions, the meetings didn't end on time, we didn't have a clear focus, no clear next steps, several things like that we've heard. And so I'm curious, for those of you who've had these experiences, and it sounds like most of us here are often participating, not necessarily leading. Why do you think that is? Why do you think those feelings of your participants, or maybe frustrations like this, happen? And as a facilitator, it's your job to shift that experience. It's your job to create the container and to create positive outcomes and to connect the people, help them stay engaged, help them, give them the resources and the materials they need to share their brilliance, to share their creativity, share their expertise. And what we need right now is all the creativity we can get. And it's not all your responsibility, it's a shared responsibility for everybody there. So let's do the next slide, Abby. So a couple tips on what we've talked about today is really about agenda. So first thing is you need to plan before your meeting, right? You need to figure out what your meeting's about and take the time to plan it before you have it. So we like to say that it usually takes at least the same amount of time as your meeting as it takes to plan it. And sometimes up to 3 times as long. It just depends. So just make that as a reference. If you want to have a good meeting, take the time to plan it. First thing you want to know is why you're meeting. So figure out what the purpose is. And then desired outcomes. What do you hope to get out of the meeting? What you hope to be true at the end of the meeting. And that's really important. Not just why, but what are the tangible things you hope to be true afterwards. And then as Abby just mentioned about representation and accountability, who's going to be there, and is that the right people at the table for you to achieve your actual outcome? And then this other note from our shared leadership triangle is making sure that you have team roles and you share those roles. So if you don't have the capacity to do this well, do you still need to do it? So those are just a couple things to share and think about before your meetings. Next one, Abby, is around desired outcomes. And so a desired outcome is, like I said, what you hope to be true. What are you walking away with? And it's not a verb, it's a noun. It's a thing that has happened. And so oftentimes in an agenda, you'll say, discuss this, or like, we're gonna gather ideas about this. But what you want is an actual noun, like what is the thing you're getting out of it? So it can be a list of your budget needs, it can be a plan for coordinating food drops, a decision on how to change your priorities right now, given the current situation. So these are all products. That's one type of desired outcome. And or knowledge. You want an awareness or a shared understanding of something so that you can do something else. And that piece is really important. You want to understand what you're going to do with that information. So for example, for us today, We want an understanding of awareness of whether these trainings are useful for you so that our team can decide if we want to hold more of them and what the content is and how often. The other thing I wanted to know about desired outcomes, and that we think about a lot and goes back to this triangle, is that there is often a rational aim, which is this product, the thing that we want to get out of it, but also an experiential aim. Like, what are your meetings experiencing? And this is particular when you are meeting for the first time, or if you know this group is going to meet ongoing for a long period of time, and they need to develop trust with one another. So the experiential aim is like how you develop those relationships and what do you want to get out of those relationships. And as our team knows, we always want to have fun, and we know that Megan's always going to be the one that says, we need to have fun in there. So we can just count on that being one of our desired outcomes for especially all of our retreats, but most of our time together. Next one, Abby. And again, as you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We'll do our best to get on them, and Jared is watching the chat box if we have questions. So another note I wanted to point out here is to, as facilitators, we have to recognize that we all have different ways to learn best, to teach best, and to engage best, right? We all engage visually, with sound, and also kinesthetically, but we all find it easier to engage when the information is presented in a way that speaks to one of these modalities first. So for our visual people, then when that comes in first, it's often helpful for us to have something you can look at, right? So these slides, for example, just sharing the agenda is really helpful. Video is helpful so that you can actually look and see people, engage with them. The chat box is helpful, so you can see that. So people that are more visual, this is helpful for them to stay engaged and to be there. If you have nothing to look at, for me personally, I'm a very visual person, like it's really hard for me to maintain focus. For the folks that prefer auditory input, give them an auditory context. So when you have an agenda in front of them, read it out loud or have somebody else read it. So Megan did that. She shared what our desired outcomes are today, and she shared a brief overview of the agenda. Those of us that have more auditory filtering, it's better for us to see or hear those words instead of just see it. And also just allowing time for questions and to have different people talking. So it's kind of like the radio. They always have multiple people talking, right? It's not the same person talking the whole time. And we are also having different people talk. So part of this is for disrupting the monotony of one person's voice. It's also for shared leadership because we appreciate that. But it's very helpful. There's a reason behind it. So think about that. And then the kinesthetic folks, use some potentially individual writing time so they can get close to themselves and what they're thinking. Use the small groups, the breakout groups. That's also really helpful for people. And also when we share in the netiquette portion that we got from our friends from early childcare, we get that this is hard with so many Zoom meetings. Some people are going to be walking because they just can't stand inside and look at the screen the whole time. So some of you that are we can't see you, I hope that you're all outside walking in this beautiful sunshine. That might help you engage more, and that's okay for that to happen. So folks that are more kinesthetic, like that's a thing that's helpful for them. So think about that. Next, Abby. So now we're going to get into a little bit of like designing the agenda. So we've talked a little bit about what to consider before, and then all these different learning modalities. That's about thinking about all of your audience and how to engage everybody in the room, because we all have input a little bit differently best. And so when we're thinking about the actual agenda components, we think about this agenda sandwich. Isn't it cute? So first you're going to notice that the startups and the closers are a given. That's the container that holds it all together. And these are the things that help us build relationships and help us be present so we can give our best ideas. So do not exclude a startup or a closer. Make sure that you put those in there. It's supporting the relationships part, but also, as Abby said, it supports the results. We're going to get better results if people feel like they're being heard and they're valued and they're trusting. So for examples today, Megan put us through a welcome. We even had music at the beginning. We shared a quote. We gave us time to really be present right now. We did check-ins, and all those things help us like get in the moment and be here right now. And I just wanted to share, also research shows that people remember the peak experience during an event and also the very end experience. And so the peak is the best or the worst thing that happened, but also the end. So don't forget about the ending of how you close a meeting. It's really important to do that. So always includes those things. And then the bulk of the sandwich, it all of these different process ideas, right? Do you brainstorm ideas, work in breakout groups? How are you prioritizing or categorizing things? You can do that through polls on Zoom and virtually. You can name things in like low cost or no cost ideas. Categorizing them differently helps people process them and engage in different ways. We also really like to do think, pair, share, and that's not a great thing to do on virtual meetings, right? But it is something you can consider doing in advance, having people pair up and talk about an idea, and then during the meeting, bring those ideas and sharing them out during the virtual meeting. So it's helping you do some prep work before you get there. So I think the most important thing here in this agenda sandwich idea is that you're creating processes that everybody can participate in, and that's going to help you get to your desired outcomes. So don't just go with the loudest person in the room, and don't just go with the last idea that was said. Figure out how to evaluate it and get to some clear ideas. So let's go to the next one, Abby. So here's a little checklist for you. First, you want to know your outcomes. And then when you think about your process, think about the people in the room. What is their level of trust and experience working together? So do you need to spend more time helping people get to know each other, or do you need to move right into like the work? Honor those different learning modalities because it's really helpful. And consider the time of day, even now with virtual meetings, and just like what people are going through in general. Like we're facing an incredible shift in our lives right now, and we all feel like there's a lot that needs to be done and can be done to support our communities. And we know this is a marathon, and we're going to have to take time to slow down whenever we can. So if you as leaders can facilitate that to get us to slow down, that's very helpful. For the sequence of things, always the opening and closing. Sorry if those slides went away, but Abby's going to bring them back in a second.
I'm going to bring them back, y'all. I'm sorry. My internet is shaky.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it shortly.
This is one thing our colleagues like to say is plan like hell so you can go with the flow. And right now we're going with the flow because we know we got a plan. It's cool. Don't worry about it. So in this scheduling and sequences of things, you want to schedule the things that are most difficult first so you know you can get through them and have enough time to get through them accurately. So always consider that. Don't think about putting the hard conversations last. Do not put a report and like updates first. Like that's, you can share that out in a different way, right? And then also think about alternating topics that take more time and energy with those that take less time and energy. And set times, but make sure you include more time than you need. We're not that good at that. But it also comes with practice. You'll get a lot better at it as you keep practicing and knowing the group that you're working with. And also schedule breaks for more than an hour-and-a-half meetings. People need to have a break. So last slide on this. How many of you have been rushed in a meeting? Felt like you had too much to do in the amount of time you had? I imagine several of you. And if you had one of those meetings, what part of the triangle do you think was left out? Often that's the relationships piece. And as a facilitator, you need to think about that. So what we like to share here is the idea that you list all the topics that you would like to cover. You figure out the outcomes for each topic, and then thinking about the processes to get those. Is it helpful for you? Can you do it before the meeting is actually called, or can it wait? And then you just cut the list down from there. I think that defining the outcome is really important in considering all those other pieces that we shared. How you get there is really important considering who's in the room. So just do your best to not overcrowd your agenda, because it's often going to leave out the relationship part, which is just honoring people as individuals. And particularly right now, it's best to give us some space, right? And it's also a good point. This is where it's helpful to have another person, an agenda team. So if we take a draft of an agenda, we always share it with somebody else and then say, now, what do we think about this? What's important here? What's less important there? And getting some feedback on that is very helpful. And the last thing I'll note about these is that our team, if we're putting on events or workshops, we will always have a facilitator's agenda that has a lot more detail in it. And if you're just facilitating a regular meeting, it's really helpful to have that to remind you of the things that you, specific timing notes or the process notes or materials that you need. So that can be helpful as a facilitator too, just have a separate agenda for that. So that's all for talking at you. Does anybody have any questions for me or Abby? Feel free to put them in the chat. That was a lot.
We did have a question about whether slides will be shared, and that answer is yes, we can share slides after the meeting.
Great, yeah. Well, feel free to share your experiences, share your questions in the chat, and we'll get to them throughout the whole time. And we want to spend more time right now having you all talk to each other and practicing a particular technique. So I think now we'll hand it back to Megan.
Great, thank you. Well, like Jenny shared, this next section is really going to be an opportunity for us to have more dialogue and for you all to speak and practice and share and demonstrate a facilitation technique. The technique that we're going to practice, we talked about at our last training is rounds, and so we're going to work a little deeper into that. And so our desired, we actually have some desired outcomes for this breakout section. Our desired outcomes are to experience what it feels like a proposal and rounds for a decision-making tool. And we will come up with an offer or a proposal to Community Food Strategies team, us, about how we should continue or if we should continue these virtual facilitation tools. And so just really briefly, what you'll experience in your breakout room is that we will share a proposal with you all. Your facilitator will then take you through, I believe, 2 rounds where we'll ask you questions and you'll get to respond. We will then refine the proposal, and then the group will kind of confirm their decision. So that is the plan. And I think we will go ahead and break out into rooms, and let's see. I would suggest that I think Dallas is going to be breaking us out. Let's do two groups.
Just 2 groups this time? Okay. We can do that.
So we'll see you in 15 minutes or yeah, about 15 minutes. We'll all come back together and debrief. I think we're all back. Is everybody all back? Yes. So I believe, Lashana, you're going to debrief our breakouts.
Yeah, I'm going to try to. I know that we're a little over on our time, but that's okay. I'll try to get us back on track here real quick. Let's debrief, see how that felt for you all, and get some feedback. So maybe we'll just start by, let me do group 2 first. And I think, I'm not sure exactly who was in group 2, but if you weren't in the group with me, then you were in group 2. So hopefully you had somebody taking notes, and somebody that can kind of report back how your proposal went, if you can share that, and any questions that may have come up for you in your group. So group 2, let's go first.
I think Lindsay was taking notes. Kathy, could you maybe talk about how our proposal went? Would you be happy doing that?
Okay, so we discussed interest in you guys continuing these online training sessions every other week through May for an hour and a half, covering things like focused conversations, decision-making processes, and addressing challenging personalities. And so I think that was pretty much what we discussed, and everybody thought that sounded good, and we would like to proceed.
Nice.
Oh, and also Jared's touching his face a lot, too much these days.
I was shamed appropriately.
Wow. Sounds like I got a lot done. I'm wondering, how did you feel about the tool, and as you went through the rounds and whatnot, how did that feel for your group 2?
I'm sorry, but when you say felt about the tool, are you talking about the breakout session?
Using rounds to have a discussion. And
using rounds, yeah, using rounds in the breakout session.
Yes. I mean, absolutely essential and great. Yes.
All right, thanks, group 2. And so I was in group number 1, and let's get a little bit of what we talked about. Did we even say who was going to share back? We need to share our proposal and all the things. Megan, would you?
I was taking notes, so I can share back. So we overall liked the proposal. We were moving towards getting consent on it, but didn't quite have enough time. We suggested, or we appreciated the every other week timeline, and suggested adding a couple other tools to the trainings. Particularly, folks were interested in figuring out how to engage voices in larger groups when we're all together like this. Yeah, anything anyone would add from my group?
Thanks, Amy. I heard the facilitating larger groups kind of bubble up. I know that came up in our group, and then it's group one, you all named challenging personalities. That was really good. I think sometimes it's hard for us to name that we do struggle with challenging personalities, you know, certainly in person, but then when you're in an online setting, just trying to facilitate that is really difficult. Okay, cool. So I think I can move us and get us back on track here a little bit. So for our next steps, we did have a slide for our next steps, I believe. If somebody can put that up for us, I'll move us there. I'll just go ahead and talk in the meantime. So I will say for the proposals, we'll take that back to our team, and we'll you know, we always take the feedback and we'll discuss, and then we'll continue these trainings. I think everyone I've spoken to so far, either on these calls or folks who have interacted with us in the past, have all found this to be very meaningful and helpful, especially during this time when we're being physically distant from each other, but we're still trying to get work done and whatnot. So, okay, so I want to just pause for 1 second before I move this too quickly. If there's any questions or anything, certainly put that in the chat box, and we'll get those answered before we get off the call, hopefully. But for our next steps, we're going to be having a call on April 7th, Food Council Connections call from 2 to 3:15. So certainly jump on that call and engage as you see fit. We'll get more information out about continuing the facilitation workshops as well. And there's a few resources that I have here. I'm going to try to drop those into the chat box, but we're going to also, before we get off the call, try to do a poll if that is possible. So whoever's got that in the background.
Quick thing, Lashana, I think, team, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our call is actually 2:30 to 3:45, not 2 to 3:15 on Tuesday.
Well,
is that true, team?
It is true. That's my original bad.
Sorry about that, y'all. We'll fix it and make it right. Anything else I might have forgot, y'all? Is that good? All right, so we're going to do this poll quickly. Can you all see that on your screen? Hopefully you can. I'm seeing some nods. So, okay, so if we can interact with this closing evaluation poll, that would be great.
Okay, we've got almost everybody in, so I'm going to end the polling and then see if I can share it successfully this time. Did it work? Can you all see it?
Yes.
Yeah, I can see it. So that's another tool that you can use, like real time on the call right there with your participants as well. Also, whoever's behind the scenes, if you don't mind, there's some additional resource reminders. I think they'll be good to have over in the chat box, but I just can't get to it right now. Food Policy Network has some resources out there. Also, Zoom is hosting a weekly webinar teaching users how to schedule and convene meetings online. So those that information is there for you. If you click on that, save that, and go back to those resources to continue learning around online, using these online tools. All right. Any questions? See the chat box doing something. Okay. All right. All right. So before we get off the call, hopefully you've learned something today and enjoyed interacting with colleagues and friends. We just want to get at least a reaction from you before ending our call today. Maybe we'll just ask for one word about how you're feeling about the training, about your interaction today. If you can just drop that over in the chat box, I'll read some of them out. How you feeling? Motivated? Inspired? Engaged? Grateful? Thankful? Motivated? Ooh, a lot of motivated today. Connected? Yay. Equipped? Educated? Motivated? Anybody else? All right, friends. Well, educated, motivated. Nice. So, yeah, again, thanks for participating, and those of you who are on the call last week and then showed up again this week, thanks for continuing to engage and be a part of what we're doing, and hopefully everybody is as well as possible during this time. Keep your heads up, stay motivated and equipped for the work that we're doing right now. Also, again, we'll put the recording and the notes on the website. You'll be able to go back to this and re-engage with this as you see fit. Appreciate y'all coming.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye. Hey. Oh. Mm-hmm.
Cool. Thanks, Abby. Yeah, I'll get the recording cleaned up and get everything ready for our debrief this afternoon.
Cool. That sounds great. Thank you, Dallas.
Yep. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Bye.